A very warm welcome to the New Mummy Company YouTube channel. My name is Maria and I am the founder of the New Mummy Company. And today I am back with video 4, can you believe it, of the series that I have been doing with Nicole Bellina. And Nicole, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining me again today.
Thank you so much for having me back yet again. This is so exciting.
I can't believe we're doing video 4 already.
I know. It feels like it went so fast.
It has, it has. So for those of you who haven't seen any of our previous videos, you will be able to find them in our channel where we talk about a lot of things in terms of relationship and sexual well-being in regards to pregnancy and postpartum. And today's video is about that mental load. And moms, I think you know that we're talking about you in this particular video. Not that we're not talking about the dads, but moms, this is particularly focused at you. So, Nicole, you are from Bliss Counselling and Psychotherapy, and you have offices in both Milton and in Guelph, and you provide
Waterloo,
services.
actually.
Oh, Waterloo, sorry, my
That's okay.
apologies.
No, you're okay.
And you also provide services online for all of Ontario.
Yes, exactly.
Wonderful. And so if somebody hasn't seen our other videos, do you want to give yourself a quick introduction so people know why you're qualified to chat with me today about all of this?
For sure. Yeah, definitely. So I'm the co-owner of our Milton location. We've been in Milton for coming up on 2 years now. And both of our practice locations, we are sex positive practice. So basically, all of us, most of us, have some level of sex therapy training, and we obviously use that in combination with other specialties or other modalities, talking about anxiety and depression, and we do individual therapy, but we also do couples and relationship therapy. So parenting, the mental load with parenting, sex and parenting, all of these sorts of things are common conversations that we have. So that's why we wanted to come here, put it into a video, make it accessible for people so that they can watch that in their own time on, the comfort of their own home. And then hopefully that might either answer some of their questions or might spark them to think, you know what, maybe we want to reach out and have more of these conversations.
Absolutely. And so today's one is a very fitting end to the series that we have had over the last couple of weeks. And I think it's one that will resonate with every parent out there, whether you are a parent, a carer, a foster parent, someone who is caring for a loved one, or you are caring for someone who is unwell, that mental load. And we just want to sort of take a moment and give some recognition to you if you are experiencing that mental load. So I guess the first question then is to just, figure out what is the mental load. So when we refer to the mental load, Nicole, what does that particularly mean and how can people understand if they are maybe not familiar with it or they're experiencing it but they have never heard the term?
For sure. Yeah, I think it's a great place to start is to really like define, right? What it is are we're talking about here. And kind of, where's it come from and why are we talking about it now? So the term mental load sort of comes from a bunch of different things put together. So in psychology, there's something called the cognitive load. This is really the effort that's being used by your working memory. We have something called invisible labor, right? This is work that is unseen, a lot of times unvalued or undervalued, and often sort of discounted, is either not being important or not being as important as something else, right? Something more visible, despite it having really like essential, impactful role in supporting, the functioning of those things, right? So if we sort of take this idea of this cognitive load and this invisible labor, and we put those together, we get this idea of the mental load, right? So really what this is the behind the scenes cognitive, emotional work that goes into managing a household, right? There was somebody at one point who kind of broke it down into a couple of different pieces. So they sort of labeled it as kind of having 4 parts. One is I'm anticipating problems. Two, I'm identifying solutions to those problems. I'm looking for outcomes, and I'm also monitoring all of the above. Often, when we finish one task, right, we're maybe thinking about or anticipating the next, but also we're doing that with multiple tasks at the same time, right? You're holding
Yeah,
space for this and that and the other thing and the next thing all at the same time, right?
yeah, yeah. That sounds relatively familiar.
Right?
So
Yeah.
can you give us an example? Maybe sort of
Yeah.
give people a little bit more of an idea of what exactly you mean by that.
For sure. So I wanted to share a personal example because I am a parent as well, right? And so I think just make it very real. And I was sort of thinking back, easy to really pick them because there's a lot of them. But one that I thought was kind of interesting was that we recently moved our kids to a new school. And so the school asked us to send in their proof of vaccination, which on the surface, that's a reasonable request. Totally
Absolutely.
understand. And seems like a simple thing. Just send it in, right? Unfortunately, not so simple for us. We lived in the United States for several years. And so our kids actually got a lot of their vaccinations in the US. So the very first thing I had to do, right, was I had to call their pediatrician in the United States, which of course requires me to know who their pediatrician is, which I realize when I say that out loud, it seems kind of funny, but there's a lot of partners out there who do not know who their kids' pediatricians are, right? So I know who the pediatrician is. I have to call them. I had to call them multiple times because they didn't answer the phone, a couple of times when I called.
Yeah.
Turned out I actually had to talk to someone else at the office because it was a records request. I had to sign a release of information, right, to give them
Mhm.
permission to release that information to me. Then I had to follow back up with them to say, hey, I've signed this information. Can you send me their documentation? They send me the documentation. Now I have to go and find the Ontario vaccine schedule. I need to see what that schedule looks like, and I now need to cross-reference what vaccinations do they have and what vaccinations are they missing, right? Compared to the Ontario schedule, because the schedule in the United States was different.
Different.
So I had to label, okay, here we've got all these one covered, but we're missing these ones, right? So now I know which ones they need. I now have to call their new pediatrician. Again, I have to know who that is. Contact the new pediatrician, book them both appointments, right, to go in to get the vaccines. I need to go into my calendar, my work calendar. I need to book that time off so I don't book any clients in that time frame. Then I need to actually take them to that appointment, which requires me letting the school know that I'm going to pick them up early on that day, right? Show up, pick them up, take them to their doctor's appointment, explain to the doctor, here's what's happened, here's why we are behind, here's what they need. Okay, great. We get the vaccinations. Then I have to update their vaccine cards. And then finally, I can scan it and email it to the school, right? So something that could have been, should have been, right? A quick little task
Mhm.
wasn't just a quick little task, right? To
Mhm.
the school, all of what I did in the background, completely invisible labor, right? They didn't know I had to do
Nope.
all of that work, right? My partner didn't know I did a lot of that work,
Nope.
right? We're just doing all of that. As far as my partner knows, they asked for a vaccine record. I sent a
And they
vaccine,
got it.
right? That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Missing all of those other pieces, right?
Yeah.
And of course, that's one example at one period of time, right? We're not even talking here now about all of the other things that might be going on at the same time, right? Because this happens for all sorts of parenting things. This happens with babies. We're talking about nursing time. We're talking about wake windows, right? Bedtime sleeping space.
Yeah.
Do they have the appropriate clothes for the weather? Do they have
Yeah.
what they need for safe sleeping at night when it's cold for in the winter versus in the summer, right? Camp or activity signups. Oh my goodness, right? Like only parents understand the stress of trying to get your kid into a summer camp or a sport of some kind when they, open that up, that registration at 7 a.m. You've got to be on there at 7 a.m. Allergies, right? Alternative foods, who their teachers are, who their friends are, what birthday parties are coming up, right? So you're navigating all of that all at the same time. That's the mental load.
And that doesn't include what's for dinner, who
Oh
needs
gosh,
to
yeah.
see the doctor today, who hasn't fed the dog,
Yeah.
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 So I think everyone now gets what we're talking about when we talk about parents having that mental load to deal with. But I guess if we connect this or reconnect this back to sort of the sort of timeline of where we've been talking about sex and pregnancy, sex and postpartum,
Yeah.
intimacy, etc. So let's bring this to the mental load in postpartum. How
Mhm.
can we how can we share that mental load in postpartum? How can we make it a little easier for new moms in particular? Again, dads, we're not discriminating against you, but just the focus is on the moms because historically it is the moms that have the bigger mental load on their shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So anyone who's watched any of the other videos, and Maria, you for sure have heard me say over and over and over again, right? Communication. So really, these conversations need to start to happen before the postpartum period, right? If you can start having these conversations during pregnancy, that can be really, really helpful to start anticipating some things, right? Some good kind of tips or strategies would be like to consider setting some time aside each week to like check in with each other, see what worked, what didn't work. The postpartum period, especially if it's your first child, you're not going to have a lot of ability to anticipate everything. So there's going to be new things that are going to come up. It's a huge adjustment. So let's check in with each other. Let's see what worked, what didn't work. Let's also review what things do we know already need to be accomplished in this next week upcoming. What events are in the calendar? What things do, maybe other kids need to do? Or what things do I need to show up for? What appointments does the baby have or do I have? What sort of household tasks need to be completed? And then how can we divide those up amongst the two of us, right? Um, postpartum planning with a partner can be really helpful, like to spark this thought process for both partners, right? If mom and partner are both coming to the table saying, "Hey, here's the things I thought of that we might want to, have to tackle," that can be really helpful just to start that routine early before you're actually in the thick of it all, right? To kind of be thinking of that ahead of time and doing as much as possible, right? Um, One of the things that I like to use, like a little sort of saying or a little slogan, do you know, in like TSA in the airport, like train stations, things like that, a lot of times they have a sign up that says, if you see something, say something,
Yes.
right? Well, mine is if you see something, do something. So if you see that something needs to be done, do it, right? Don't ask if it needs to be done if you know it's a thing that needs to be done, right? And this is a lot of times me talking to partners, really, right? Because I think a lot of times what happens, and I've heard this myself, right, is, well, if you can just tell me what I need to do, then I'll do it for you, which is lovely. And that's a supportive partner who's trying to be involved. But that still requires me to hold the mental load
Mhm.
around knowing what things need to be done and then taking the time to actually ask you to do those things when some of those things are just common knowledge, right? The garbage needs to go out on Wednesday mornings, right?
Yeah.
If you know it's Wednesday morning, put the garbage out, right? So there's things like that where if you can anticipate it or you see it, if you can notice it, then just take care of it, right? So that one is really important, can be really, really helpful. And the other thing too is for a lot of folks, especially again with a first pregnancy or a first baby, is a lot of partners haven't actually spent a lot of time alone with a baby. So they may not be able to really understand or empathize like with what that mental load feels like. So it's actually really important for partners to have like one-on-one time with the baby, right? To be able to know, okay, I have to make sure that I have wipes close to me. I need to know that we have enough diapers that fit, right? That are the right size. Mom has probably already sorted those things before, but right? Things for them to think about. Do I have something to entertain them? How am I going to feed them? Or, do I need to have some kind of awareness of nap time? Like, is there a nap time in the time that we're together? If there is, what do I need for the nap time, right? How does that routine work, right? So involving partners as much as possible in routines, but also giving them the opportunity to solo parent a little bit as well, helps them to start to realize and understand, okay, here's all of the things that go into this, right? So that can be really helpful as well. And then also kind of just thinking about if you have other children or an older child, also how are you going to divide that time, right? I think a lot of times, especially if mom is nursing, a partner tends to spend a lot of time with the older child, right? And so that's super helpful, but for partner to sort of think, okay, like maybe take the older child or older children out of the house, right? If you know it's a nap time for babe and mom could maybe have a rest during that time, take the kids out of the house, right? Have some sort of activity to do. Thinking about those kinds of ways that you can support the partner broader than just, spending the time with those kids. But we also need to be sure that we're switching that up too, right? Partner needs to have connection with baby. Mom needs time with those older kids, and older kids need time with mom, right? So, how can we also swap that out, right? And so, those are great opportunities for the partner to spend time with baby and actually be able to kind of, be part of that and have that solo parenting experience and sort of understand it from a different perspective, right? Um, and again, coming back to that open communication is, it is a lot in the beginning. And there's a lot of
It is,
unknowns. There's a lot of things that are going to pop up that you
of
fully
course.
couldn't anticipate or you didn't know were going to happen. Right. And so just expressing like, hey, I need some help, right? I need some support during this time. Can you take care of, X, Y, or Z? Yes, that's mental load to have to ask for that, but at the same time, it is important to express your needs, and ask for what support you could enjoy, right?
Absolutely. So
Mhm.
your travel analogy is see something, say something, and mine is the oxygen mask. When you're on a plane, they'll always tell you that when the oxygen mask is released from the overhead bin, put that on first before you help anybody else, even your children. And I think that's something that we need to kind of remind ourselves of, that we need to look after ourselves, because at the end of the day, nobody else is going to do it for you. So
Exactly.
make sure you are prioritizing yourself, because there isn't a medal that's there for you when, when you're not able to. So
No,
yes, put that
exactly.
mask on first.
I say that to clients a lot, actually. It's also a really good one for sure.
Yeah,
I know you really want to be a good parent, and being a good parent actually requires you to also prioritize your own
self.
well-being, right? You are not going to like, you might physically be showing up for your kids 100% of the time, but chances are that you're not fully there, right? And so if you actually can prioritize some self-care, downtime, rest time, whatever it is you need to do to kind of offload some of that, that means you're going to show up in a more high quality way, right, with your kids, right? And you're going to enjoy it more. You're going to have, more fun. You can play, right? Because you're not having to hold on to these other pieces, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've been told, you've been warned.
Yeah. And we all have been, and we all still
Oh,
do it.
nobody listens. Nobody
Right?
listens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But try.
So when we are in the postpartum period, how do we plan ahead in terms of who does what, such as laundry, cooking, cleaning, grocery runs, like all of the things that, happen whether you have a baby or not. But obviously, when you have a new baby, they're taking up 90% of your time. So how do we make life easier when we're preparing for that postpartum period?
Definitely. So there are some really cool postpartum planning documents that you can actually find online. I could have send them over actually, and we could add them.
Okay.
So those can be really helpful, and as well, even just like a therapist or a coach, or like organizations such as yourself. There's really great, I think, supports in this area to like talk about these sorts of things. Folks who kind of specialize in perinatal mental health can go over this with you, right? But also talking to other parents, right? This is going to be one of your greatest resources is other parents who've kind of been there, done that, and have some experience. Everybody has a different experience for sure, but there are a lot of similarities, right? And there's a lot of things that you learn as you go. And so if, folks and they have maybe older kids or kids of a similar age, ask them, right? What sort of things did you not know were going to come at you, right? What sort of things have you realized take up a lot of your time, right? Or a lot of your mental energy? Where does your money go? How do you how do you navigate these things, right? I'll tell you with toddlers, your money goes to berries. I cannot tell you how many berries you have to buy. They love the berries, right? So it's like things like that. You don't know ahead of time, right? Until you get into it. So talk to other parents, create a network. You've heard me say this before too, right? Is find that community that can support you. As I said earlier, think about making a list of things as much as you can ahead of time. But then as you go, right, what are some things that need to get done? How do we divide that? Think about things that you could maybe offload to one person or the other. So, my partner and I, we have conversations. There's certain activities or certain tasks that just belong to my partner, some that basically just belong to me, and some that are shared responsibilities, right?
Mhm.
And the shared responsibilities space is really like where a lot of that, if you see it, do it, comes into play, right?
Mhm.
Dishes are a shared responsibility. So if you see that dishes need to be done, just go ahead and do those, right? But there's other things that we've completely separated out. And so then I can completely offload that to my partner, and I no longer have to think about that because I can trust that my partner is going to take care of that, right? So think about, how you want to divide those certain things up. If you're privileged enough to have someone who could support you, maybe someone who could come in once a month and do some cleaning for you. If you don't, then how are you going to tackle those kind of household chores, right? How are you going to divide those up? Um, are there certain tasks that the same task requires each of you to be involved? You mentioned groceries, right? So this is again one of those things where there's a ton of invisible labor that people
Mhm.
don't realize, right? Oh, there's just a grocery list. I need to get these things. Well, you had to think through what you needed on the grocery list,
Mhm.
right? So does
Mhm.
mom create the grocery list, but dad actually goes and physically purchases them, right? Can we do that together, right? Um, ask for help. Honest to goodness, this is another one of those things. I was told this, we tell everybody this, and I still think there's a lot of reluctance around this, right? Is
Yep.
if you have friends and family members, loved ones, they want to help you, right? Like
Yes, they
they
do.
they really want to. They want to hold your baby while you have a
Mhm.
shower, right? They
Mhm.
want to play with your baby while you take a nap. They are interested in helping you, right?
Yes.
I think the majority of people offer support genuinely. I don't think a lot of people offer it in like a polite sort of way. Like they wouldn't offer it if they
No.
didn't really want to do it, right? So take people up on those offers, right? See if they can help out. Can they spend time with your baby while you're doing some other activities, right? Or while baby's sleeping, can they just sit with you? And just
Yeah.
be there with you and share a tea and just, talk about something not related to baby, right? So ask for what you need, but also accept help from others when they're offering it, right? Um, I think all of those things are really important. Physical things too. You can meal prep. I
Mhm.
know I found that really helpful. Again, with grocery list, right? If we meal prep for the week, then we know what we're making every day. Gosh, we can avoid that inevitable, like last minute, what are we doing for dinner
What's for dinner?
today? Whoa, right? because we know and we've prepped it and then we've made our grocery list accordingly, right? So that can be helpful. And then when we're talking about, again, trying to plan during pregnancy for postpartum, is think about making things that you can freeze, right? And like one pot type lasagna that you can throw in the oven, doesn't take any additional prep work. You can just toss it in and it cooks, right? So prep those things ahead of time as well, because that really helps to decrease, right, this mental load around having to figure out dinners and
Absolutely.
right what's connected to that. The last thing I want to say about that too is just also remembering like the expectations on yourself during this time frame, right? This time is hard. It is really hard. It's kind of chaotic a lot of the time. You don't have a lot of sleep, right? So it's okay if your house doesn't look spotless, right? It's okay if your kid, oh my goodness, like if you've got an older kid and they've had chicken nuggets for 3 nights in a row, it's
Exactly.
okay. They're gonna be fine, right? So just remembering that those expectations of your life before, they may not be realistic now, and that doesn't mean that those things may not come around again, but just that self-judgment, right? And those expectations, just seeing if we can kind of just turn that notch down just a bit to say it's okay, right?
Lower your expectations overall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just around all the
Just
time. Yeah.
just go easy on yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
So if we go back to postpartum again specifically, in that and sort of staying in the mental load vein, how do we navigate the sex topic when we want to and we know that we would enjoy that intimacy with our partner and we want to, but you just do not have the energy. You physically don't have an ounce of energy left in your body because of all of the nursing and the feeding and the burping and the crying and just that constant doing what feels like 24/7 at the minute.
Yeah. For sure. Right. Um, I think it's really important to have a partner who's educated
Mhm.
on this. And again, communication about it, right? Talk to each other, right? Explain that. I really am attracted to you. I really love you. And I
Mhm.
am too tired right now, right? That is about you. That is not about your partner, right? I think a lot of times people feel badly. They think that their partner, is going to feel rejected or, take that personally. But if your partner understands, a lot of times they don't feel that, right? And truthfully, they're also pretty tired a lot of the
Yes.
time, right? Partners are also
Yes.
often very tired. So it's also okay if your sex life doesn't look like it used to look and it looks a little bit different, right? You may have to plan it a little bit more. You may have to kind of have a conversation about when that might be. Um, there was a recent study. I went to a conference recently on like sex therapy and research, and they were discussing a recent study where they interviewed people. There's kind of this misconception, right, that spontaneous sex is more satisfying or more pleasurable. And so this research actually totally upended that. And essentially, they found out that people who planned sex didn't rate their sexual satisfaction any lower than folks who had spontaneous, right? So it's a
Yep.
bit of a misconception that it has to be spontaneous for it to be passionate or for it to be
Mhm.
exciting, right? So it can be planned. That's okay. But we want to take into consideration context, right? So maybe do a little assessment of your energy levels.
Mhm.
Figure out, okay, is there a certain time of day where you feel a little bit better? Maybe you feel a bit less tired, right? Maybe you previously used to have sex before bed and now that is just not possible, right? Maybe it's middle of the day, lunchtime break, right? Maybe it's in the morning before the kids wake up, right? Maybe it's only on Saturday afternoons when grandma has baby for a period
Yep.
of fine, right? And that's okay, right? This is a phase. We've said this before too, right? This is
It's
a
a phase.
phase of life
Yeah.
and it will shift and change, right? And so just because something's different right now doesn't mean it's going to stay the same, right? So also again, giving yourself some grace and being gentle with yourselves because it may not look the way that it used to, right? And you
No,
may be too
definitely.
tired and that's okay. Right?
Yes. Yes, that is very, very okay. But obviously, we will want our partner to still feel loved and wanted and needed. So what are the options? What are some other ways of how we can include them so that they can see that we still care and we still love them and we're still attracted to them? But there's obviously just not that energy left in the can to go the whole hog.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this question is a great plug for a previous video if people haven't watched the whole series in order. Is, kind of thinking about, does your partner understand the postpartum recovery process, right? Do you understand the postpartum recovery process, right? How long it takes for your body to heal, how long it takes, and like when there are shifts and changes in hormones, right? Because those things play a really significant role, right? So in previous videos, we've talked about that 6-week mark that gets talked about at doctor's appointments. We talked about weaning off of nursing as well, right? That there's a hormonal change at that time frame. So being mindful of those different stages of the recovery process as well, that can be really, really helpful. And then just like thinking about broadened forms of intimacy, right? Can we recognize that, sexual intercourse or a sexual encounter might not be the thing that happens every day anymore? Maybe it's about snuggling up and watching a movie. Maybe it's a little stolen kiss here or there, or a little hug. Just remembering that the intimacy is broader than just sexual encounters and that connection. The other thing I wanted to label here is this idea of being touched out. So, this is something that moms talk about a lot, or stay-at-home parents. I also want to be really clear here about that part as well. It's not always moms who stay home. And
No.
so, there are a lot of times where partners, like people will split that parental time, which, by the way, I fully endorse if possible for
Yes.
people to do, right? Going back to what I said earlier about other parent having one-on-one time, in relationships that I've come across where the parents have split the time, the mental load looks different. And I've seen it look different, right? So that definitely can be beneficial. So whomever is staying home, right, whichever parent is home, there's this idea of being touched out, which is just that there's kids touching you or a child or a baby, physically touching you a good portion of your day, right? So being really, really mindful that at the end of the day, your partner may not really want to be touched, right? They might be overstimulated, they might be exhausted, and so they actually just don't want touch. So again, coming back to this idea of communication is ask your partner, like, what are some forms of intimacy that we could enjoy, right? Maybe we aren't snuggling because that feels like a bit too much, but maybe we're sitting together on the couch and we're holding hands, or we're going for a walk and we're holding hands, right? So all of these things can be really important. Again, just communicating those things and being aware that if your partner's touched out, that actually isn't about you. That's about the experience that they've had all through their day. Right.
Yeah. And anyone with toddlers knows that children just want to hang out with you 24/7. Anyway, you're a bit like,
Right? Yeah, exactly.
well, you're their person, so it's understandable, but it does very often lead to people feeling like, I just want to be left alone.
Yeah, it's enough. It's just too much. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward then where maternity leave is finished, paternity leave is finished. We're both back at work and life is busy because life is busy when you have two working parents or one stay-at-home parent and who has a full-time job in being the carer. Either way, either scenario, but obviously at that point relationships can struggle because you're not seeing a lot of each other because you're like ships in the night. Everybody's working, there's commutes, there's extra hours, like there's always something going on. I think it's really hard for the other partner to sort of see what's going on in your life because they're obviously not there. And so each person thinks, well, they've got the easy option. They've got the easy option because they're at home, or he's got the easy option because he's out at work. How do we bring in a little bit more conversation? How do we shed light on what we're feeling, but obviously not playing a blame game? How do we ease that sort of stress and tension and sort of build for a future together? Because obviously this is going to go on for a number of years because the kids are going to be young for a while.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important here to validate that both people's experiences are hard, just in different ways, right? I recall this from when I was home, and my partner was working, and it was COVID, and he was working from home. And we had this conversation because he would come out of his office and I'd be like, gosh, here's the kids, right? Take the kids. I need a break. And he's like, I just worked all day. Like, I need a break, right? And so it's this recognizing that, yeah, your day was really hard and my day was really hard. They were hard for different reasons. And how do we support each other, right? In figuring this out. So really validating like each person's experience. It can be really helpful when you know this is coming, to try again, proactively set a plan. Setting up that time to communicate each week, check in, what went well, what didn't go so well. Um, how do we divide and conquer the tasks, right? How do we support each other in a way that's meaningful as a separation from those things, right? So, we talked about not bombarding him when
Yeah.
he first walks out, but recognizing he's working from home, doesn't have a drive home right now to like separate work and home. So he would go for a 5-minute walk around the block and then come back and take the kids, right? So conversation of, okay, what would be supportive to you as you transition roles, for example, right? Planning around time for yourselves as a couple, right? So what are your date nights like? Do you have opportunity for date nights, right? Do you have time where you can plan to disconnect or be distraction free in some way? Talking about a plan for things like wake ups during the night, right? Who's doing bedtime routine? Who's dropping off and picking up, right? Is that the same person doing all of those things? Maybe we need to figure out a way to divide that up a little bit more, right? But we do want to have time for each parent to have time to themselves, but we also want to have time where parents can be together as well, right? So a little bit of finding balance where you can, right? It's not an easy task, but and it shifts and changes, right? And that's the thing, especially about that first year postpartum. So much happens. Babies change so
Oh, huge,
significantly, right?
huge.
So we're talking about an entire year as our postpartum time frame. Baby at 3 days old, baby at 6 months old, baby at 10 months old, that looks
So different.
so different. So you can't set a plan and then just execute that plan without adapting and changing as you go, right? So making sure you're coming back together and revisiting that conversation, and having space for those things, right? The other thing too, and it kind of goes into a bit then our next question is something that's really near and dear for me. As a therapist, I work and I do somatic work, which is really body based. And so there's a concept in somatic work and in trauma therapy called your window of tolerance. So this is essentially this space where we ideally want to be from a nervous system perspective. So, in our window of tolerance, what we feel is tolerable, right? It's manageable, we can handle it, it feels good. There's a space above that window where we are overwhelmed, and there's a space below that window where we are overwhelmed. Above the window often looks like anxiety, looks like restlessness, extreme emotion, right? Below the window looks like depression, numbing out, withdrawing, right? So when we think about mental load, when we think about what parents are managing, I want you to sort of visualize a cup of water, right? And that cup of water represents your window of tolerance. So everything that you're thinking about, every task, everything that has to be done, that's a little bit of water added to your cup, right? One task on its own isn't going to fill your cup, but
No.
10 tasks at 10%, now you have got a full cup, right? If you add one more task at 10%, your cup is overflowing now. But that task on its own, that one 10% task, if you didn't have all that other water in your cup, that task would have been manageable, right? So we want to think about, when partners are feeling cranky, when they're tired, when they're irritable, a lot of that has to do with a full cup, right? There's just too much water in the cup. I saw an Instagram little like meme recently that said, mothers aren't angry, they're overwhelmed, right? And I went, yeah, that's it. That's it right there, right? So we need to remember this as ourselves, but also in our partnerships, right? That just because the water that's being added to the cup is different for each partner, it doesn't mean that it's any more or less important or more or less impactful. If each person's is overflowing, they're going to be overwhelmed, irritable, disconnected, withdrawing, depressed, anxious, right? So we want to be aware of the things that are adding water to our cup, and we want to be aware of the things that take water out of our cup, right? What grounds us, what helps us to feel rested, to feel calm, to feel safe, right? As we can take water out, then we have more capacity, right, to hold space for those other things. So,
Lots of things to think about in that one for sure. Thank you for that, Nicole.
hmm.
So, is it possible to go back to the way we were before we had kids, before life became even more crazy? Is there is there a is there the opportunity to, have things how they used to be?
So my answer to that is yes and no. Um, I hold the perspective that just kind of generally, we can't really go back to the way things used to be
Mhm.
because we are always changing, right? We're always moving forward. Stuff is always different, right? We're changing, context changes. As humans, we're different, right? There does need to be some acceptance around the new roles, right? And the change in your relationship. You are no longer just a couple. You are now a couple and a family, right? You are now a unit of three or four or five or whatever, as opposed to what you were before, right? That being said, I don't want to be like doom and gloom. That being said, right, there's actually potential for reward and increased connection over time, right? If we can accept these new roles, we can take from the past the things that we really appreciated and we can bring those in. They might just look a little bit different, right? So again, individual time, date night situation, right? I'm using a lot of personal examples today, but one of the things that we were just talking about as well. So our kids just started skating lessons and,
Oh,
they're a little bit older, so I'm not in that postpartum phase, but they just started skating lessons. And for us, it feels a little bit like a little date night, right?
mhm.
Like we take our kids, they go on the ice for half an hour. We get to sit just the two of us. We get to have pride in our kids and what they're doing. And it feels like this really nice time for us to connect, but our kids are
Lovely.
there. That's not something we would have ever done before,
Yeah.
right? So it's a little bit of an adaptation, right, of expectations. It's a little bit of being creative, right? And having pride in these new roles that you have, right? But also appreciating when you do have those micro moments of connection, right? So, like I said before, I think it is important. Consider if you have those external supports, prioritize your relationship and your connection, that quality time, have those date nights, but also just looking for those micro moments of connection. Can you sit together for a tea after the kids go to bed or a glass of wine? Right? Can you every once in a while not have dinner with the kids, order in, right? And have a little picnic, right? Just you two after the kiddos go to bed, right? Or is that a lunch in the middle of the day because by the end of the night you're too tired, right?
Yeah.
All those sorts of things. So we want to remember that that postpartum period is really challenging. Marriage is hard after having a kiddo. There is a statistic that says that about 67% of couples report decreased marital satisfaction in that first year postpartum.
That's a lot.
That's a high number, right?
Mm,
So we know if we know that, we want to do as much as we can ahead of time, but we also really want to prioritize the time that we do have in those connection timeframes, right? And that's why we want to accept help when we can. That's why we want to reach out and create a community and have support, right? Because all of those things help us to feel more grounded in our situation, to feel more like we aren't drowning in it, right? And we're feeling like, okay, I can navigate this, right? That is all really, really important because kind of tying it back to sex again, what we know is that there's a negative spiral that can happen, right? So if a partner, mom, we'll just use as an example, if mom is feeling overwhelmed with the mental load, right? And she's not seeing that her partner is participating in some of those things, then she feels frustrated, she feels disappointed, she feels angry with her partner, she feels resentful, right? Like this doesn't feel fair, right? I'm not satisfied with my partnership right now. It doesn't feel equitable. If she starts to feel that way, chances are she's going to be feeling less connected to her partner, which means she's going to be less interested in sex with her partner. If she's less interested in sex with her partner, oftentimes partner then feels resentful, frustrated, disconnected from her, right? And then the cycle continues, right? So that exact same cycle, we can flip it totally on its head, right? If it feels more equitable, if it feels like things are divided up, if it feels like partner is participating and I'm seeing my partner see something and do something, I might actually feel more connected to my partner. I might have more energy to spend individual time with my partner and to put the effort into having that picnic with them. And if I have that connection with them, then I might feel more interested and have more desire for that sexual connection. And if I feel more of that desire and connection, then my partner will feel that as well. Right. And so we can totally shift that spiral and turn it on its head and create an upward spiral and increase that interest in sex with some changes in terms of that, behavioral side of things. Right. But it really does take a lot of patience and communication and connection between those partners to talk about, share their feelings, help your partner understand where you're coming from, show up for your partner, right? Support them in the things that they need, understand the difference between equity and equality, right? It may not look exactly the same, but
yeah.
it might be equitable given that your partner is working 9 hours out of the home in a day, right? Versus you, right? So you need to be mindful of those things as well. Bringing all of that together to say, right, that high communication, support from a therapist, right, support from an organization, having your community, all those kinds of things come together and help you to navigate this time frame, which is particularly challenging, yes, but is also incredibly rewarding, right? Watching your baby from 3 days to 6 months to 10 months, right? It's an
Huge.
amazing time frame, right? So much happens and it's, oh, unbelievable to watch it all unfold in front of you,
It
right?
is.
Yeah. And so using some of that and feeling some of that, right? That comes with having that ability to be in that window of tolerance just a little bit more frequently. So,
Excellent. Well, I think we've certainly given people a lot of food for thought. I'm sort of sad that we've done our series, we've done our 4 videos. We might have to think about another series that we can do
my,
together.
I agree. Yeah, we're gonna have to come up with some frequently asked questions to review.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you once again. It has been a pleasure to do this with you, and we hope that you, our viewers, have found it enjoyable and helpful. As we mentioned, Nicole's team are available in person in Waterloo and in Milton and via Zoom elsewhere virtually in Ontario. And our services here are available in 5 cities across Canada in terms of the postpartum support. But again, if you have questions, we're always happy to answer them. If you've liked today's video, please do give us a thumbs up. It helps us so much more than you know. And if you have any questions or any comments that you would like to share down below, please do so. And if I can answer that, I will answer it. And if I can't, then I will ask Nicole to give me the information to share with you. So we would love to hear from you if you have any comments or questions to share with us down below. So until next time, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Nicole. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.